Gentlemen, hello. Happy post
Gents,
Thanksgiving. How's everybody
gents,
doing?
Are you guys still full? Because I'm still full. I've been having
dude,
leftovers like every day.
tell you what,
Yeah.
man, it's really impacting my willpower and ability to drop some LBs. Hey, and I want to real talk, Jordan, real question for you. When we first signed on before we hit record, you were pretending that your headphones weren't working. Was that just you prepping for Stu's voice and like having to really like having to like really like
Got
just
got to
bolster?
ease into it. Just got to ease into
You
it
gotta
slowly.
ease into it. You can't take it all at once. You gotta really, yeah, no, I totally understand you.
Well, hey, I tell you, there's a trick. There's a trick to Thanksgiving that I've just learned about. Typically, my wife and we host Thanksgiving at our house, and I do the turkey, and we have, everybody come to our house. And this year, my cousin decided to host it at his house, and so we all went to his house. And what I found out is you don't get to take home all the leftovers. Like when somebody else hosts,
You
like
didn't bring your Tupperware? You bring
none
your
of the leftover.
Tupperware.
Yeah, but like even then, like you're like, like you don't take a lot, right? So
Yeah.
if you don't want a ton of leftovers, just go to somebody else's house. That was one lesson I learned. And two, the second lesson I learned from Thanksgiving this year is, I was in charge of making like our one dish that we were supposed to bring. And my wife, and it's not really a new lesson because I keep on relearning this lesson over and over again. I was mashing the potatoes for a sweet potato casserole, and I used the blender, like the two prong blender inside the bowl, and I like just gashed up
Dude, that's like
the
a
bowl big time.
rookie.
I
That's
know.
silly, dude. That's not even
Just
like
lazy.
that's not even
Um,
like that's like using a metal spatula on like one of those coated pans or Teflon. Like you don't do that, dude.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and then I forgot
you
to
guys are
put.
way too advanced for me. I'm not even that far, man. Like I'm the first one cooking something wrong. We were lucky. We're redoing our kitchen and we got a steam convection oven.
Ooh,
Hmm.
We cooked a 17-pound turkey in like an hour and 15 minutes, and it
that's
was
fancy.
perfect. And it's really
Nice.
good for leftovers because you put the leftovers there and it steam heats them, and so they taste like they're brand new.
Mm.
That's amazing. Well, let's
That
hey, I want to jump in because talking about Thanksgiving, I will say, Jordan, we've had you on the show a couple times now, and the big P, small P conversation that we had around purpose, big P purpose, small P purpose, and the book that's coming out, the Purpose Code, which I can't wait for. What's the date? What's the date?
January 7th.
The 7th. Okay, so January 7th, get the book, go out, get it. Pre I'm sure you can pre-order, you can do just get the book. But the conversation we had and the idea around big P small P has really impacted impacted my life in a significant way, but it also has made me very much more appreciative and grateful when I'm exercising the small P purpose. An example being, we went up to the mountains actually twice this last week. The first time was kind of a family tradition, and the neighborhood all goes up to the YMCA camp here locally in Colorado and just has an amazing time. My brother came out from California. We did Thanksgiving then, and my experience with leftovers is different because my mom brought the Tupperware, filled it up, and sent it with us. So there was no avoiding that, which was delicious. Um, but then we came home, and just being very conscious of small P opportunities, we booked a room for the day after Thanksgiving, and we went up to the mountains, just our family, and did some skiing and snowboarding, and it was relatively inexpensive. But dude, I'll tell you what, like I stopped on the mountain. And my kids are getting to the point now where they're like getting really good, and so we all were going down these blue runs as a family. But I was able to stop and really be like, man, this moment is absolutely beautiful. And I was kind of overcome with gratitude because we're all kind of going down the mountain together. I'm looking at my little dude just flying down, doing awesome, but we're a family unit doing this stuff. And it would be easy to not go to the mountains. It would be easy to not invest that couple $100 in a room. But all the little moments in that, going out into the hot tub outside in the snow, but we're outside in a hot tub, me and the boys, like all those little moments, when you're conscious of them and intentional with them, with the small P moments, dude, it makes all the difference. There's no big P goal. There's no goal that I could have set and achieved that would probably have the same level of emotional and just gratitude impact and happiness and joy that those moments had. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I think we forget this. We spend so much time trying to become these really big, audacious things, right? Whether it's in our career or these big goals. And we forget the way you become is by doing. And it's often in the process of doing where you're actually being your best self. And so I think very much with what you guys are talking about when you're talking about David going and doing these things, it's specifically being in the action in the process that's important. It's not what it leads to later on. It's not where you end. It's not the top of the mountain. It's actually when you're in the midst of climbing that actually lights you up.
Yeah, and I set no goals for that weekend outside of just let's be together as a family, let's do this stuff, and ultimately I could have never planned it or it would have never I could have never anticipated what it would become, and I think you nail that with just do it right, like just there's time to be spent to figure out the kind of dad, the husband, the person that you want to be, but really in the execution of doing things, making mistakes, and all that kind of stuff, that's where the real magic is. And I think we need to be so much more focused on that every day, right? In all our interactions, even in the way that we treat other people and the way that we, where we invest our time and our efforts. It's such a magical thing to be able to every single day live in the small p purpose.
Yeah, it's about being present. And Little P Purpose is all about being present. It's about flow, right? Because that's exactly what happened to you. You were like out on the mountain, you were with your family, you were deeply engaged in what you were doing. You lost track of time. You weren't worried about what you accomplished. You were just in that kind of flow state where you were present, intentional, and that moment can overtake you. And so the question is, how do we create more of those moments in our life? And how does that become the norm as opposed to be the occasional? And I really think Little P Purpose does that. It's kind of engaging in these things that fill you up in the process of doing them and then doing more of that on a regular basis.
Jordan, so one of the things I was kind of thinking through, kind of, relooking, rereading through your book and reading, some of your blog posts, which are fantastic, by the way. Um, I was thinking about, one of the things you said, I think it was one of your blog posts, you said, purpose is not just about personal happiness. It's about creating a unique legacy and making an impact in the world. And I was thinking about all the stuff the big topics that we hit on in the Kinetic Man, family, friends, fun, faith, finances, health, like all these kind of big topics that have a lot of values associated with them. And I was thinking through, how do I act out, model, and be a part of these big values, these big topics, and model them for my kids in a way, but in a way through little purpose, right?
So it's interesting. We understand generational trauma. We totally understand generational trauma. In other words, your parents or your ancestors go through something, it makes them think a certain way about life, which is probably not the greatest coping mechanism. But because you grow up in that atmosphere, you take on that generational trauma and it becomes yours. We do this without thinking, and we accept that this happens without thinking. What we forget is the exact opposite also happens, which I call generational growth. What that means is when you go out into the world and practice Little P Purpose, get involved with things that fill you up, that you enjoy the process of doing, that connect you to other people, you also pass that on to your kids. So you model that same behavior. And what you're really doing is you're giving them permission. You're saying, I give you permission when you become an adult to go out there and practice Little P Purpose yourself. Find what lights you up and go for it. And so I almost think that the best way for us to actually model this behavior is to live that life ourselves. And this is the hard part because it sounds selfish. Because many of us before this, we wanted to say, well, our kids are our purpose or our spouse is our purpose. And I get it. That's a very loving concept. But I think we have to have Little P Purpose outside of the people because we want to give those people in our lives the opportunity of generational growth. We want to give them permission to do the same thing. When your kids are older, you want them to get deeply engaged in things that light them up. And when you do that, you're actually modeling that behavior. You're handing down generational growth instead of generational trauma. And I think it's one of the best gifts we can give them.
Yeah, it's interesting. It reminds me of a conversation that we've had multiple times now, and it's we really encourage men to go get friends, like to no kidding, like find the dudes that are going to be your covenant friends and like go build a relationship. And most men will acknowledge, they'll be like, yeah, I need friends, I need friends. The thing that really flips a switch is when you change the perspective and say, okay, do you want your children to have friends when they get older? And they're like, oh, I haven't thought about that. I'm like, okay, well, let's take the conversation to a different place. Let's not talk about you and your friendships and your continued lifestyle of putting friendships on hold forever until you get to a place where you're going to regret it, right? Let's stop that conversation. Let's stop that dialogue. Do you want your children to have deep friendships as they grow up and be adults? And every dude that I've ever spoken to is like, of course I do. I'm like, cool. Where are they going to learn that?
Yeah.
How are they going to learn that that's okay?
And here's the thing. I think we have to demystify friendships because a lot
Mhm.
of us go out and we're like, I need to build community. So they're like, okay, I'm going to go do this thing where I can build community. But a lot of times it's not a thing that excites them. And I think that's fine. But if you want a better version, find something that excites you. Find what little P purpose looks like in your life. Do it intentionally, and it's going to bind you to other people who have similar interests. So we're talking about the deeper friendships. I had this problem. I became a doctor because my dad was a doctor and I co-opted his version of purpose, but it didn't really fill me up. In fact, it was much more big P purpose, trying to make up for the cosmic loss of his death when I was a little kid, than little P purpose, which was the inner joy in the process. Here's what happened. I surrounded myself with doctors. I went to medical school and residency. I hung out in the doctor's lounge and I didn't connect with any of these people. And yet I was one of them. I had the MD right next to my name just as much as they did. But when I finally realized medicine wasn't my purpose and started becoming an author and a blogger and a podcaster, I'd go to these conferences and I would meet people who had the same interests. And I didn't have to try. We just talked about things we loved and we connected. And I found that I was connecting to these people more in 10 minutes than I connected with doctors who I'd known for decades. And so maybe we need to demystify this, especially for men, and say instead of putting yourself in a situation where you feel all conscientious and you're like, I have to go make friends and I have to ingratiate myself to this whole group of people I don't know, maybe a better game plan is find stuff that really lights you up, engage in those things, and have that naturally bring you towards other people. Because when they see you doing something that lights you up, like a moth to the flame, they're going to be attracted to you and they're going to want to collaborate. Or if they have something to teach you, they're going to want to teach. And if they have something to learn from you, they're going to want to learn. And I think that's where we get those more deep, enduring relationships. And I could point to you guys. My bet is your love for creating the content that you have has deepened your relationship and brought you all sorts of people into your life. You didn't intentionally say, I'm going to do this to make tons of friends. But my bet is, as you did this, other people who had similar interests or similar needs were attracted to you and you formed a community around it. And that's what we want to do with things that light us up, because that's where those enduring communities and relationships are going to come from.
And Jordan, it's interesting that you bring up, just how you were a doctor but you didn't find the community in that and the little purpose in that. And I was thinking through, as military men, transitioning out, I think a lot of us talk about purpose in a way that you're describing more as like a big P, of this like overarching purpose of service, right? A military service. And as soon as you leave that service, a lot of veterans really find it hard to fill that void, right? To find another purpose. But really, I think that's probably inaccurate if I'm thinking about it. And correct me if I'm wrong. Like this service oriented career, police, fire, doctor, military, the big peep, the purpose behind that career that all goes away. But I think in the interim, trying to find these little p purposes is definitely like the way to go, right? Like, and could make your transition way easier, because I think a lot of people search for another like a big purpose, like a service oriented career, and they don't find it, in something else.
I think the military is really interesting, especially because you're talking about service. And don't get me wrong, service can be little p purpose, but the point of that means that you go into service and enjoy the process of doing it. You love showing up to that homeless shelter, or you love visiting elderly and bringing them meals. And you do that regardless of the end goal. But when you start thinking, well, I'm going to serve this many hundreds of people and I'm going to create my own non for profit and we're going to make millions of dollars to help people in need. And when it starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you start doing things you don't love doing in service of these big goals, you're like, well, I don't really like fundraising. I like going into people's houses and helping them. But if I want to build this thing to that goal I want, I'm gonna have to start fundraising. I'm gonna have to get on social media. I'm gonna have to be in the boardroom all the time. I don't really like those things, but that's what I have to do in service of this goal. That's where it starts feeling really incredibly painful. On the other hand, if you say, I love service, that's my little p purpose, and I'm going to do Meals on Wheels, and you do Meals on Wheels for a while, and you end up meeting the other people who do Meals on Wheels, and maybe one of those people is like, I love building non for profits. In fact, that excites me more than getting in the car and delivering this meal. And you team up and collaborate with this person. Maybe they start doing the things that you don't love, and you keep doing the things that you do, and you work together and you collaborate. So I think you can still change the world. I think you can still have impact and legacy. And in fact, I think you can still have goals. But the point of little p purpose, whether it's service or anything else, is you have to enjoy the process of doing these things, regardless of whether the goal comes to fruition or not. And so there are a million ways you can go into service. If you're a military person, you're like, I believe in serving my country. I did it for a long time. I'm out of the military. You can still serve the people around you, or you can find things that light you up. Let's say you love playing football. Guess what? That little p purpose could turn into service in the form of coaching kids. Maybe you're going to coach underserved kids at the local YMCA. All of these things can lead to service, they can all lead to purpose. But when we let go of those huge overarching goals and just start enjoying the process of doing these things, I think it lights us up in a different way. And I actually think it's our best use of our skills, talents, and joys. And therefore, whether we mean to or not, I think the impact and legacy actually ends up being bigger.
Yeah, and it's one thing that I'm thinking about as you're talking through it is a level of the word that just keeps or the words that keep popping in my head is self-awareness. And really I think we all not and I don't intend to use I'm not intending to belittle anybody, but I think when we use language like I'm a military guy because I love to serve or I want to serve my country. I sometimes think that's a bit of a cop out because that could mean something very, very different. It not could. It means something very, very different for me than it does for Stu. And this became clear to me recently as I started diving into like, what am I truly passionate about? What did I love about the military? And for me, what I loved about the military was that I was given opportunities to be in a room full of leaders, the key leaders within a military command. And my role is, especially as I got more senior, was to serve those leaders to the best of my ability to help them to ideally become the best leaders they could be, because then the entire command would thrive, right? I never felt the responsibility of going out to the command and trying to make it thrive because of my great leadership, because I wasn't a great leader. That wasn't it. But I loved investing in people. Specifically, I loved investing in leaders. Well, that recognition, the service to leaders has caused me to go down different paths now within my church. Like, who do I want to serve? Do I want to serve the little kids room? I don't, but I actually volunteered from like age 0 all the way up through college and then into adult ministry because I wanted to test it all. And I recognize, man, I don't, and I will say, God bless middle school teachers because they are the worst human beings. I have two of them. I have two of them, but they're the worst human beings in the world. And but I knew I was like, this is not. And so when it came to things that where I truly desire to serve. The transition now, it took me a couple years out of transition to recognize, but I would offer that I'm more fulfilled now in what I'm doing and the path I'm going down because I truly understand what serving my country and serving others means. And that is manifested in a vastly different thing that I would not have anticipated, especially as I self-described. I just want to serve my country. That's great. Like I think a lot of people just want to serve their country, and it looks vastly different. And it doesn't have to be the military. I think it's a bit of a cop out, right? Again, not saying that disparagingly, more encouraging to say, dive into what does that mean for you, and how can that manifest on a daily, in a in a daily way with little p purpose. And dude, that concept is super powerful, right? Like it really is powerful when you start exercising. It just it's more than just, cute words of little p big P and dismissing that. It really can change your life drastically every single day.
I think the cop out you're talking about, let me see if I can put this in the right words. We've allowed society to define what it looks like to live out your belief system and core. And usually we've allowed society to define it in big, audacious terms, right? So it's not, I want to be of service to people who are unhealthy and sick. It's, I'm going to be a doctor. It's not, I'm going to write down information for other people's consumption to help them learn and grow. It's going to be an author. I'm going to be a New York Times best-selling author. So we have kind of all these big audacious titles to describe what doing something that lights you up should look like. But the problem, because they're big and audacious, we go from doing something that feels good on the inside, something we love the process of doing, and we feel like there's this predefined endpoint, this big audacious goal that we then have to use that interest and excitement to achieve. And what I think I hear you saying, and what I truly believe, is we need to let go and not let society tell us what our big, audacious purpose should be. Instead, we should decide what kind of things we like to do, what lights us up, and do those in a way that feels authentic and enriching and nourishing to us. And I think for many of us, it's really dropping some of those big, audacious plans and big, audacious versions of purpose and instead doing what feels good. And here's the downside: if you, for instance, decide what service means to you, and instead of going after that, you go for something that feels more big and audacious, whatever that means, being, moving up the ranks in the military and being a four-star general or whatever it is, what typically happens is you start doing stuff you don't like to do in service of that big goal and you burn out. And what happens when you burn out? We generally quit the thing altogether. So instead of living our values and doing those things that are deeply important to us, we set our sights on these really big goals that don't necessarily fit us. We burn out when we find we can't meet society's expectations of what we should become. And then we leave the thing altogether and are questioning why we don't understand purpose in our life, or why those things that are deeply important to us we can never seem to carry out.
So let's talk about money.
Let's talk about money.
I'm interested in this because you came from being a doctor to then talking about investing and financial freedom. Your podcast is still about that, primarily earn and invest. And the worlds that we live in, the worlds that we hang out with in these communities of investors and real estate, business entrepreneurs, there's always this discussion around a goal, a number, the number of doors, the passive income, the retirement number, these big audacious goals, right? I'll be happy when I'm retiring and I'm financially independent. Um, and then there's this other side that kind of contradicts of money doesn't make you happy. There's this idea of you make it to a certain number and then you're fine. How do we intermatch that? How do we be okay with having big goals of finances and being financially independent, being financially free, making money, passive income, all these things, but still enjoying the journey and the little p purpose in it all. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think we have to realize that some of these things are mirages, especially when we say, I'll be happy when. So I'll
Yeah.
be happy when I have enough passive income. I'll be happy when I hit a certain net worth. I'll be happy when I retire. I'd always follow that up with why? Like, why? Because I won't be able to work anymore. And why do you want to not work anymore? Because work stresses me out. And why does work stress you out? Because instead of doing things I want to do, I'm doing things I don't want to do. And what do you want to do? And that's where people get a little stuck. Making money does very little for you other than it gives you the opportunity to control what activities you're doing as time passes. People who have more money can pay other people to do things for them. They don't have to clean their house, they don't have to show up to work. They can still pay their electric bill, etc. And therefore, they now have free time to pursue the things they want to do. And so I think we have to be very clear about what these mirages are and get to the why behind them. But here's what's magical. If you can start really asking yourself that question, and the answer comes out, I want to spend more time with my family. I want to get deeply engaged in this thing that's important and meaningful to me. I want to do this thing that I've always wanted to do in life, but never had the energy, courage, or time. Well, here's the great thing. When you start identifying those things, you start to realize that to actually reach those quote unquote goals, you actually become that person by doing the thing. And you don't have to wait until you have a certain amount of money or you're to a certain place in life to start doing the thing. You can start doing the thing now. And in fact, you can still build a financial framework as well as do that thing that's deeply important to you. And you can also integrate it into your life. I was a perfect example of that. I was always looking at the mirage. I can leave medicine when I make enough money, when I have enough investments, when I have enough passive income. And all I could think about is what I didn't like about medicine. When I eventually had enough money, I found myself lost because I had no idea what to do with myself. So I used what I call the art of subtraction. I just started getting rid of things I loathed at work. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew what I didn't want to do. When I did that, I cut everything except hospice work. And there was something I realized it was epiphany. I was like, oh, I would do this even if I wasn't being paid for it. Well, here's the funny thing. Did I really have to wait till I was financially independent and all those years and burn out of medicine to realize I liked hospice medicine? What if I had done some of these exercises at the beginning of my career, way before I was financially independent? If I had realized I loved hospice medicine, why couldn't I have built a career around that? Maybe I would have made less money. Maybe I would have become financially independent many, many, many years later. But I don't know if it would have mattered because I probably wouldn't have burned out because I would have been doing something that was deeply important to me. I would have been connecting to other people. I would have been making communities and relationships. I would have been living my little p purpose. And oh, by the way, I'd also probably make enough money to survive and support my family. And so I think if we can get past this once I have or once I am, and start thinking about the why we want to get to that place, we can start incorporating those things into our life now because God knows I don't know how much life I have left. My dad died when he was 40 and I was 7. I'm 51, so I've already outlived him by 11 years. I don't want to wait another 10 years till I get to some financial place to finally become the person I want to be. And I would say that you at 30 or you at 40 or you at 50 doesn't want to wait either. You could start becoming the person you want to be now, and the way you do it is by doing the thing. And the way you do the thing is not buying your way, and it's not by buying your free time, it's by actually doing the thing. And so the big question for all of you is what is the thing in your life that lights you up? And if you can start identifying that, you can build a life of little p purpose around it today, not tomorrow, not next week, not next year, not in 10 years, but today.
Yeah, and it also gets me thinking about the kids again. My kids and just you are somebody of substance and influence, right? No matter who you are, whoever's listening, like you are a person of substance and influence, and you're influencing somebody. And if you have kids, that's magnified typically. And so I just think about my kids and the questions they ask around the kinetic man, the military, C-12, the different things that I do, they're they're paying attention. And a
Yeah.
lot of it is because it's not necessarily that they're like dialing into what is dad doing today. It's that they're dialed into the way that I talk about the things that I do, right?
Yes.
And no matter what you're doing, if you hate it, like my dad, he said things like, "Well, son, work is this stuff sticks with you, right?" He said, "Well, work is always more important than family. Like you have to provide for your family. You have to support your family." Well, when you're a kid and your dad says work is more important than family, like it sticks in a different way, and it's significant. Or, yeah, I hate this job because of this, or I'm not happy because I'm doing this stuff. Versus, I love what I do because of the men that I serve, the people that whatever the thing is, or the reason why you love serving your country, and diving into that. It's fascinating how much the kids pick up on all that, but more than they pick up on it, and just your influence in that sense, is it empowers them to think differently about their
Mm.
future, right?
Yes.
Because the school can tell them, well, you need to go, do school, graduate, go to college, get a profession. Well, but my dad says something different. And my lived experience says that I have many different opportunities. And what's important? What are my family values? Right? Like they are getting all of that from the way that we talk about the vocations that we choose, the callings that we pursue, and how we either are victims to that or that we are in control of and have power over, and we're decision makers in those things.
What you're doing unwittingly, what you've been doing forever, is you're teaching them about little p purpose. You might not have had the words back then, but what you're doing is you're doing these things that light you up, that you enjoy the process of doing. And your kids are seeing this modeling. And at some point in their life, they're going to say, hey, my dad looks really great and excited and joyful when he's being this identity. So I, as a kid, I'm going to try on this identity and I'm going to try it out. And I might like it and I might not like it. But that process of trying on identities, trying things, see if they light you up or not, you are giving them that template. And you're totally right. A lot of it's about agency. What do we have control over? The things that light you up, you generally feel you have control over. Your kids, for whatever reasons, might not get into the best colleges. They might not get the best opportunities. They might just be the wrong person at the wrong time, or they might not have a lot of luck. But those are things that they have zero agency over. But trying on the identities that you've modeled for them and deciding whether they like them or not, that's something they have agency over. And that's a skill which they're going to continuously use. They started with you, but they're going to see their friends do things and they're going to try on those identities. They're going to see your wife do things and they're going to try on those identities. They're going to see mentors and they're going to pick and choose and they're going to evaluate it based on the criteria that you've showed them. My dad looked most lit up when he did this thing. I tried on that identity. It didn't light me up. Maybe that's not for me. But I did this other thing and that lit me up. Maybe that is right for me. And so you're beautifully modeling what little p purpose can look like. And it's not what they teach you at schools. And it's not what society tells you you have to be. It's people going out into the world, doing things they enjoy the process of doing and engaging with other people. And that's what you're teaching your kids.
Something that just came to mind, I'm just kind of curious on where you sit with it, is social media
Huh.
and our kids um, seeing it, being engaged with it, consuming it. How does that impact positively, negatively? Does it create anxiety? Does it create FOMO? From a view of purpose.
So it's not only kids, it's adults too.
Mm.
If you look at social media, especially a lot of influencers and a lot of advertisers, they are showing you a version of what I'd call big P purpose, big audacious purpose. You are seeing six-pack abs, you're seeing the nicest stylish clothes, you're seeing people who are traveling the world over, you're seeing people who are running eight-figure businesses. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to get you to co-opt their sense of purpose so that you buy the thing they're selling or you follow them or you pretty much add to their financial well-being. And so the problem is they all want to sell you on that. And if you watch TV, all the advertisers and marketers, they also want to sell you on this big, audacious version of purpose, of something that looks very glamorous, but it's very hard to achieve so that you buy the thing and make them wealthy. The problem is a lot of us can't have six-pack abs. Some of it's genetics. Some of it's we just don't have the time and energy. Some of us live in poorer areas and don't have access to the good food. And most of us don't really have the will to work out that hard. Many of us are not going to travel the world many times over. Many of us are not going to run eight-figure businesses. And so when you feel like you don't have agency over this, it's going to eventually lead to anxiety. And so a lot of us are scrolling through TikTok and Instagram, and we're feeling more and more anxiety because this version of purpose is being shown to us. And somewhere deep down inside, we know that we're really not either willing to do the work or not able to become these images. And so I don't think it's good for all of us. Now, granted, there are some great versions of social media. My son uses YouTube all the time. He uses it to fix cars, he uses it to learn about technology. There's some really cool things you can do with social media. But if we fall victim to the images that are being shown to us of what purpose looks like, it generally takes us off track and leads to lots of anxiety.
So I'm thinking, so how do, David and I have a podcast, right? We have social media. We post on, we do clips and reels and stories and LinkedIn and we're trying to promote our messaging of the Kinetic Man podcast. So how do we do that in a way that doesn't negatively influence our kids or negatively influence other followers that listen to us, follow us, watch us, whatever? How do we do that in a way that doesn't impact them, to where like what you're talking about, causing anxiety, causing all these negative issues?
I think it's all about intention, right? We start with beliefs and ethics, and then we go out into the world and take action. And our intention is the way we convert those beliefs and ethics into action. And so the question is, what is your intention? When you go out into social media and talk about the kinetic man, my understanding of both of you and what I know of you is that your intention is to help people to make the world a better place. So the likelihood that you're going to be producing images to either sell something or this big, audacious, unreachable purpose, it's just not likely you're going to be creating that kind of social media. We can control what we create and we can imbue it with the right intentions. The hard part is what other people create and what our family and everyone else consumes.
Yeah.
But I have no idea that when you guys are using social media to further the causes that you love and you're involved in, you probably do it with really pure and good intentions, and it shows.
Now
I
I'm just
appreciate that.
posting pictures of my Lambos, and
You will
all
never
the.
post a picture of your six-pack abs because that'll never happen.
Oh, you're so sweet. You're so sweet. I'm just glad you put your tooth in for this interview.
You're welcome.
Well, and I think there's also an aspect of, um, there's an aspect of, like you said, it's where your heart's at, but it's also what are you trying at the end of the day? Is it consistent with the small p or the little p purpose that you've defined for yourself, right? So for, in the case of the kinetic man, my genuine hope is that men get into deep relationship with other men around things that they are passionate about, and it goes deeper than fantasy football and the weather, right? um that's but my goal is not, I don't personally desire that all those dudes are my friend. I just want all those dudes to have what I have in my life, and that is built around the commonality of things. And it takes work, right? But there's also purpose in seeking how do I best serve Stu and my local community. I say community, but it's really just like my homies. Like it's just my dudes that I care about deeply and love. And we do things like snowboard, mountain bike. I mean, I got a text this morning, it warmed my heart, of a guy that says, "Hey, I have time to mountain bike ride today. You want to join me?" And I was like, "Dude, I can't because I'm talking to this awesome dude on a podcast who you need to listen to, who he did listen to, and he did have a comment about you." Um, but but I made sure to say in there, like, dude, I'm so honored that you thought about me and I love you, brother. Right? Like, but that's just genuine. I want other people to have those kind of text exchanges with their people who's not going to be me. And at the end of the day, what that's reflective of and what you're talking about, Jordan, is is this complete confidence in that aspect. That's that little p for me. I have complete confidence that that is something that God created me for, and that type of relationship, right? Period. And I mentioned, God, I read an interesting article. You did an article about you. I think you started by saying, "Hey, I haven't talked about faith," and I intentionally avoided it. But what I love about that article is where you got in that, and I can't remember the author's name that you were talking about, but where you got in that article was the number of things that you have in common is it outweighed the things that you don't. And in addition to that, when you live, I believe, and you said it in there, I believe that every single aspect of our life you can fill with little p purpose to include things as big as faith, right? And I think, quite frankly, I believe if you're not living little p purpose in your faith, you're truly not living out your faith. It's just not, I don't think it's possible to serve something as in the context of Stu and I, to serve Jesus just in big P. Well, I'm looking at heaven. That is my goal, and that's the end state. Everything else be darned. That's where I'm going. No, dude, like that's not how he lived, right? It's how are these people in front of me? How am I impacting them? How am I loving them every single day? And in each of those areas, there's small p purpose, right? There's the little p purpose. I say small p. I know it's little p. I apologize, but the little p purpose, if you're not living it in every single aspect of your life, no matter how big that aspect may be, I just don't think you're really honoring who you are.
Yeah, and when it comes to faith, look, some of the most beautiful things in life have occurred because of faith, and some of the nastiest things in life have occurred because of faith. Faith itself is just a reflection. The question is, and I would say that probably most of the beautiful things come from the little p purpose. It's the charity, it's the being there, it's the support, it's the community. All of that is so wonderful and positive and fills people up. And probably a lot of the nastiness comes from big P purpose. I need to convert everyone to think exactly like I am. I need to not only believe in the teachings of Jesus, but I need to become more Jesus like myself to the point where I'll do anything it takes to get to this kind of deified space. And that's when it becomes this race to godliness, which I think becomes very much big P purpose. And I think it burns people out. I think it's kind of a bad version of purpose. Whereas I think the little p purpose we see in faith is beautiful and uplifting. And, there's studies. Religious people tend to live longer, right? We know this. And I think a big part of that actually is the communities and the connections. It's the practicing the little p purpose.
There's a blog post that you wrote, and you have like two little graphs. It says like the rules of purpose. Big P, you have listed goal oriented, scarcity mindset, highly fallible, lacking agency, all or nothing anxiety that leads to disappointment. Little p, the box says process oriented, abundance mindset, impossible to fail, agency, incremental gain, longevity, health, and leads to happiness. Curious if you would agree with me on this. I think there could be one more word added to the rules of purpose around little p, and it's people.
I think that goes hand in hand with the happiness. And here's the kicker that I tell people about the book all the time. When you actually look at the true studies about what causes happiness, the Harvard Adult Developmental Health Study I talk about all the time, but basically
Yeah.
it shows that nothing other than interpersonal connections is really what leads to happiness, right? Money doesn't do it, career, you know, position, none of that matters as much as interpersonal connections. Here's the thing. I just think little p purpose is a great conduit to people. I
Yeah.
think, again, when you show up as your best self, people can't help but be attracted to you. And that's where we make these deeper, more enduring communities. And again, I see it very much in Kinetic Man. I think that's exactly what you guys are doing. You are practicing your little P purpose. You might not have called it that before, but you're doing things that you enjoy the process of that deeply light you up. And because of that, like-minded individuals are interested and they want to be part of this. They want to collaborate. They want to go biking on an odd, Tuesday, because that's what you do when you're engaged. It's the people.
Yeah, I mean, all the examples that are in your book, all the examples that we talk about, that you've talked about on your podcast and your blogs, all these little P ideas really essentially lead to doing that thing in community with other people that like doing the same thing that you do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there is a world we can imagine where, let's say, you're an artist and you love the process of painting and you paint your whole life and never show your paintings to anyone and never interact with anyone and you still love painting. Like, I could see that as a possibility, but I don't think that's the way most of us get there. I think most of us get there by doing these things that light us up and that connects us to other people. And that's where the happiness, I think, for most people really lies.
Yeah, go do paintings with other people, in a studio,
Yeah.
right? Share
Yeah, and
those
and
and
learn and collaborate and
right.
grow and sell or give your paintings away to people who will put them in their house and enjoy them. And all of a sudden there, it's like, wow, I painted this thing. Someone put it in their house. Their son liked it. It was passed on when they died. And 50 years later, I'm long gone, but my painting is still hanging up on someone's mantelpiece. And that child is telling the story of their grandmother who bought it from some guy, and it becomes part of their lore. It becomes part of impact and legacy. And so I think other people really like if you want to go on, because all of us want to be immortal on some level, right? We don't like the idea that we die and we stop and that's it. But the problem is, cells get older. You are only going to be on this earth a certain amount of time. But what you contribute, your little p, the communities you form, takes little pieces of you and puts it into the next generation and puts it in the hand of all these other people. And therefore, the essence of what you are, those things that you created, last long after you're gone. And we
Mm.
know this because we all have a long lost family member who we look like or act like, or we have the same hobby or the same joy. That's all that generational growth I was talking about that we've handed down. That person's long gone, but the essence of who they are still lives in the next generation. Even if that generation doesn't even know their name or doesn't know their story, bits and pieces of them still exist. And that's the closest we're going to get to immortality. That's the closest we're really going to get to impact and legacy.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, I think I'm probably on pace to live to be about 150, 160 years
Yeah,
old.
at
So,
least, at
I mean,
least.
at
Yeah.
least. But it's I think that is it's amazing when you change your perspective and the impact that you can make on and even as as you were talking about it, I could there's a lot of things I could definitely do by myself that I love. I mean, I could do the podcast by myself. I could go mountain bike riding by myself. I could go snowboarding, but there's just a something. There's just a so for those that love being in that, just try it with somebody. I would just try it with somebody that shares your passion and love because it adds a different dynamic that is just it's like jet fuel, and it's not one plus one is two. It's one plus one is five. It's six. It's eight, and it's just it's fascinating math when you do it that way. I want to real quickly go back to the money thing, and you said something that was very insightful, and I think it's important just to touch on briefly because this is your world, right? Financial independence, money. You're super smart at it. You've been doing it a long time. People come to you for advice, and I just think it's important to hear as we seek little p, as we seek to prioritize little p and to put big P and little p in the right places. Will more money make me more happy and better at relationships?
The answer, I think, unequivocally is no. And we know this, right? So there have been all sorts of studies about money and happiness. Two of the big ones that people always talk about are Kahneman and Deaton. I think it was 2010, and then Matt Killingsworth in 2016. They all did studies to show would more income bring more happiness or not. Kahneman and Deaton thought that up to about $70,000 a year. This is back in 2010, but after that, you didn't get any increasing happiness. Killingsworth actually thought that after $70,000 a year, you still could get increasing happiness, but only for certain subsets of people. And it wasn't as incrementally large as you would up to the $70,000. They eventually worked together and came up with similar ideas, but a lot of these studies were kind of taking old groups of data and utilizing them to basically look backwards and figure out from this data how things worked. Or the Killingsworth study was like they would text people multiple times a day for a few months, and they would aggregate all that data and come to this conclusion. But I like to go back to the Harvard Health study, which really shows that it's interpersonal connections that's probably more associated with happiness. And we kind of know this. We know if you look at different countries, there are plenty of poor countries that have a higher happiness index than some of the most wealthy ones. We also know they've been doing studies. I forgot the name of the paradox. There's a paradox actually that shows that when you take basically a country where everyone doesn't have enough money and you give everyone money, it increases their happiness and sense of well being for short term, and then they fall back to their baseline. Part of the problem is it's not even whether we have money or not, it's actually comparative. So if you take half the population and give them more money and don't give the other half of the population more money, then people remain happier for longer, the ones who have been given extra money. And so it's almost a comparison game. And so the idea really is, does money itself do it? No. I think it's the sense of we're just as good off as everyone else, and we have these interpersonal connections, and we have things that we wake up every morning for. I think it's an easy mirage again to think that money's going to fix everything. But ultimately, I don't think that's what the data actually shows. And, another study that's really, really interesting is they took two very different populations of people and measured their happiness before and after a main event. So the event for one group of people was winning the lottery, and the event for the other group of people was a car accident that caused paraplegia. And what they found is that although the people who won the lottery were a lot happier briefly in the beginning, they eventually fell back down to their baseline level happiness. So ultimately, after years, they were not nearly as happy as you think the money would cause them to be. Here's what's interesting. The paraplegics, the people who had the car accident, originally were a lot less happy right after the car accident, but over the years, they actually returned and were a lot more happy or much closer to their baseline. And so it's a really interesting study, and it suggests that we tend to habituate based on outside environmental stuff, right? So money we think would make us much happier, but we tend to habituate back down to a normal level of happiness. But the same with bad things, which you think they would make us less happy, we tend to habituate back up to our baseline sense of happiness. And so I think the things we think really reflect on happiness probably don't, but the one that seems to be best studied is the interpersonal connections. And I think that's much more enduring.
I love that. And the data, you're a data driven individual, very smart, Doc G, right? And I think that the data supports what it really supports in my mind is immediate action. Like start now. Start now. And I believe that starting is okay, what is my little p purpose? Multiple little p per pie. I don't know,
Per
purpose
pie. I
per
like that.
pie.
Yeah.
My little p per pie, and just start doing it. It's not hard. It is not hard, and it is so fulfilling, and it changes the dynamic of everything.
Remember, people get confused about the definition of purpose. And a lot of people think the definition, at least colloquially, of purpose is the why of doing what we do. I actually don't think that's what purpose is. Purpose is about action, and it's about present and future. It's actually carrying out those things that deeply fulfill us. And so, very much like what you just said, little p purpose, it's all about action. If we want to get into the why, I think that's more of a meaning question. That's more interpreting your past and what stories you tell yourself about yourselves and what's important to you. But really, purpose is just about action and present and future. And if I think you look at it that way, again, it becomes much easier because just like you said, it's like try to figure something that might bring me some happiness and then build some actions around it to see if it works or not. That's it. Straightforward.
Well, Jordan, as always, we really, really enjoy having conversations with you. This has been fun. I think you're one of very, very few, maybe like two or three other people that have been on the podcast more than twice. And we can't wait to have you on again when your next book comes out. Who knows when that'll be? But let's talk about Purpose Code.
Six
You
months. I
mentioned
think
it.
it's 6 months.
6 months, is that about the average time to get another book out, Jordan?
We will see. Nowadays, so this is self-referral here. I mean, The best way for me to keep writing books is when people buy enough books that I can convince a publisher to publish the next one. So hopefully, if this one's successful, most traditionally published books take about 2 years from the day you sign the contract to the day it comes out. So
Wow.
the next big one, at least, will probably come out in 2 years. I've been working on something on the side, a healthcare book, which is going to come out sooner than that. But my next book that touches on things like meaning and purpose and personal finance will probably be, fingers crossed, around 2 years from now.
All right. Well, we'll be ready for you when that happens. Uh, Purpose Code comes out January 7th. Guys and gals, like David said, it's a fantastic read. I love having these conversations. Jordan, thank you so much. Glad you enjoyed your Thanksgiving. Hopefully, your house is finished soon. And this will be out before Christmas. So, guys and gals, go buy this book. Get it ready for the new year. Jordan,
Thank you
thanks,
so
man.
much for having me. I appreciate it.
I
Absolutely.
just want to just a calendar check.
Oh, yeah. Go.
January 7th is the release of the book.
Yes, January 7th.
Is that before or after Christmas? Or you're saying the podcast is up
The
before
podcast will
Christmas?
come out before
Oh,
Christmas.
great.
So
I love
so
it.
so
So as
buy
a new
it as a
so
gift for people.
so get it.
That's
Yeah.
right.
I love it. I love it. I just want to clarify because my dates were kind of messed up. Christmas, I was thrown off a little bit by when it may or may not occur. I just wanted to make sure that I understood the
I'm glad.
alternative
I'm glad
facts
you are
and
understanding
calendar.
now.
Yeah, thank you. I love you.
Jordan,
Thank you,
thanks again.
Jordan. This is awesome. Appreciate your time, buddy.
Thanks
See ya.
again.